So today, this is week number 10, I believe, and I think I'm due for a haircut. That'll be coming up in the next week or two. So this past week at school, I only taught for 1 hour. It was awesome. Did a lot of relaxing this week because they have tests, and so I guess when the school has these monthly tests, the students stay in the classroom of the teacher. So I didn't have to do any teaching for Monday through Wednesday because all the students were testing. However, on Tuesday, I did take over one of my teacher's classrooms because he was gone to Phnom Penh for the week, for a few days, because he went to a Peace Corps oriented tutor training session. So he is the person I picked to be my tutor, and they have a session in Phnom Penh to train all the tutors to learn the International Phonetic Alphabet, IPA. So much fun. He hates it. But that's okay, because I love it. So I think we can help each other help each other. He knows all the words, and I can do my best to figure out the IPA stuff. But he's also teaching me reading and writing Khmer, which I have been doing a little bit on my own, but now that I have a teacher, I feel like it's going way more quickly because I can rehearse the sounds and I can hear the sounds over and over again, and I can have someone who's correcting me if I'm not doing it correctly. Gosh, Khmer alphabet. Let's see here. Let me get my notes. Alright, so here's a quick breakdown of the Khmer alphabet. So, for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. You get all these that are the consonants, right? So, these are the consonant sounds. You get ga, ka, go, ko, ngo, ngo. It's like an NGO sound. And so on. I'm not going to go through all of them. But basically, you got your consonants, and then you add vowels to the consonant. So every consonant makes an ah or an o sound unless you add a vowel to it. So the consonant would be here in the square, and then if a consonant has this symbol over it, it makes a different sound. And this symbol over it, it makes a different sound. This symbol over it makes a different sound. Yeah, so that has been fun to learn. I'm pretty stoked on it. I think it's cool. It's definitely really hard. So here, let me give you an example. So here we go. This is our first letter, ka. And if you look, ka with that vowel sound, that's one sound. That's a different sound. That's a different sound. That's a different sound. Then we got ka, and it's the same thing. So that's rudimentarily how the Khmer alphabet works. There are a couple of other random letters that make their own specific sound that don't come in that often, but you have to learn eventually. But for the most part, this is the core of the Khmer alphabet. And personally, I think it makes it a lot easier to learn the language when I can read the alphabet. IPA only does so much because each letter and each sound, for the most part, is specific. Like, this vowel syllable makes this sound, and this consonant syllable makes this sound. Whereas IPA, there's kind of not a direct translation between the sounds. For instance, I learned the word cut. Cut is like think. And some teachers would write it as like it's a K, an upside down E, and a T. The upside down E makes an sound. But then there's an I with a slash through it, and it makes like an sound. And so some teachers would write it K, I with a slash through it, T. Same with the word for and, nung. They would write it N, upside down E, then N with a tail. It's like an NG sound, it's the ngo sound. But other teachers would write it N, I with slash through it, NG. and with a tail thing. And that, is confusing. It doesn't directly translate. So I feel like having the actual written language, it just makes everything so obvious, the way to pronounce things. And now that I'm learning the spelling of things, I think it's cool. It's definitely PACA though, which means it's a little bit hard. But I'm an enthused learner, and I think it gets me excited, and I love learning about it, so I feel like it's gonna be all right. So I'm trying to learn that with the IPA too. Anyways, so that was this week. So he came back on Friday. He left on Tuesday, and that's when I took over his class. Basically, I just had to sit there. I had to write all of the tests on the board, because you write the test on the board, and then the students put the answers in their notebooks, and then they turn in their notebooks, or a piece of paper, basically. It's not like in America where everybody gets their own individual test and writes it on there. My students, they just have their notebooks, they write it in their notebooks, and the test is written on the Kadakian, which is the whiteboard. And so I was in 4th grade A, which is the more advanced 4th graders, and they all finished within 20 or 30 minutes, so I had like an hour or something to kill. So I taught them the game Heads Up 7 Up, which they loved and could not get enough of. And now even when I taught them again this week, they were like, let's lang that game, let's play Heads Up 7 Up. They don't know what to call it. They just call it the thumbs up lang game, or they just show me thumbs up and lang game. Yeah. And if you're unfamiliar, I don't want to explain it. Look it up if you're unfamiliar, because it was hard to explain to kids. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna do it. So basically, there's 7 people up at the front of the room, and they've got their eyes open, and everybody else in the room has their eyes closed, and they put a thumb up. And then of the 7 people, each one of them goes to one other student and touches their hand, and that puts their thumb down. And so there's 7 students in the room now who have their thumb down. And then when everybody opens their eyes, the kids with the thumbs down try to guess who it was who touched their hand. All right. And if they guess correctly, they get to be a person now with their eyes open touching hands, and the other kid sits down and has to close their eyes with a thumb up. That was much easier to explain in English. Imagine that. So that was my Tuesday. Thursday, testing was done, but I didn't teach again Thursday because we had a meeting on Thursday. So we have a 4-hour meeting in the morning, and then nobody's teaching in the afternoon because everybody was at the meeting in the morning. And at this meeting, I did my PACA, which was the thing I was avoiding for a long time, but I got it done pretty much at the last minute and then some. It was 2 days late, but don't tell the head people. So PACA, I chose to do 2 activities. Well, you have to do 2. So the 2 that I chose was the community map, which is where they draw a map of the community, which shows helpful places for where you could, first of all, important places like the police department and like a doctor's office, the market, just to help the volunteer get to know the town. And secondly, even more importantly, things that can help towards your secondary project. They've told me since I got here, they want me to facilitate teaching English to teachers and to also build a community garden, or help design and help build a community garden. So I encourage them to put locations on the map that are useful for that. So like, where do you get gardening supplies? Where do you get school supplies? Plants, etc. There are 2 nurseries in the town. I knew about one already, but I learned about a second one. So that was pretty helpful. The second thing you do is a calendar, a seasonal calendar. So it's got all of the months, and then it's supposed to be things like that would affect work. So the rainy season, for instance, maybe when it's rainy, it's not a good time to do the community garden, but it might be a good time to start planning the community garden and doing designs. And then when it's dry, you start building the garden. Also, there was like illness, you know, when's a more common time for people to be sick? For instance, in the United States, I feel like the winter time, people get colds more often, people are more sick more often in the winter time. And then in Cambodia, from what they did on the map, seems like the hot season is when people are getting more sick. So extreme temperatures, who'd have figured? Lots of people would have figured. That's how it goes. Yeah, so that was the idea behind the 2 activities with the teachers. Personally, I don't think I understood it well enough to tell them why it was important. And I don't think they understood why it was important. I don't think anybody understood why we were doing what we were doing, but I was told by Peace Corps to do what we were doing, and so I did what we were doing. I see the purpose of PACA in certain situations, but I felt like in this situation, it felt superfluous. Like I didn't learn a whole lot because I already kind of knew a lot of stuff that was on the thing, and I didn't know like what else to even look for. Like the map, it's a small town. I've been around most of it. I learned about where the gardening supply store was and a nursery, but I could have just asked one person about that stuff, you know? And the seasonal calendar too. I guess I learned a little bit from the seasonal calendar, but it seemed like it was a lot for the amount of time it took. Like I had to do all this planning. I don't know. I just don't, I guess I'm not totally understanding the benefit of the PACA yet, because I feel like I would have been fine without doing all those things. So maybe in other sites or in other countries, PACA makes sense, but for me in my situation here, I felt like I didn't want to do it. I don't know why we were doing it. And it didn't seem like anybody else understood why we were doing it either. But they were team players and they played along and they happily did the thing that I asked them to do, even though they didn't quite understand why we were doing this thing. I mean, they got it, I guess, to some degree, I think. You know, Peace Corps said this is important, so we're doing it. That's as much as I understood about it. I don't know if they understood more than that. Because that's all I understood about it. That's just how it goes. Yeah. And, yeah, I don't know. Got thoughts about the PACA. I would maybe like to talk to some other volunteers. See how their PACA went and if they found benefit in doing the PACA. Yeah. Anyways, I think those were the most important points of this last week. I'm happy to have the PACA under my belt, and I am also stoked to start learning Khmer again. It's been so helpful having a tutor already. Even just the little things, just having, like, I think when you are not actively learning something, it's hard to keep your brain engaged. So I'm surrounded by Khmer all the time, and I'm hearing people talk, but I'm not having the learning, like, attention, looking for new opportunities, because that takes a lot of energy. So, and it's hard to know when to do that. So having this organized time to like turn my brain on in a learning way, 1 hour, 2 hours a day. Right now we're doing 4 hours a week on 3 days. So having this structured time to like engage my brain in that way, I think is really helpful, because then I'm doing the learning, and then as I go into the community and talk with my parents and talk with other teachers, I recognize words and things that I was learning in my tutoring session, which is the organized, structured learning time. So it's been super helpful so far, and I'm excited to keep doing it. I really like the person that I am learning with, so looking forward to more. All right, I believe that wraps up week number 10. Whoa! We got 2 more weeks until Phnom Penh, which is exciting. And then next week is my site visit. So not this coming week that I'm in right now, but the week following. So that is when PM comes and visits us, take you out of school for a day and go get you coffee and whatnot. But that will be an adventure for a couple weeks from now, according to the video timeline. Yes. Alright. Enjoy whatever you're doing, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching.